Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay. So I think we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody. This is all I have. I had to get a shirt, but I didn't think that would be appropriate for our early morning commission meeting. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our 19th meeting of the Statewide Commission on Recycling Markets and Curbside Recycling. Today, I think it is our lucky day in that I think we have a pretty short agenda based on what I've seen coming in on the policy recommendations from the committees. So first we'll go ahead and call the roll, and I'm going to just count heads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So it looks like we're short a few of our commissioners. Do we have, let's see, are we missing Commissioner Lapis?
Nope, I'm here.
Oh, you're here. Is there anybody else on the phone? Commissioner Ferrante? No? Let's see, who else are we missing? My printer is down again, so my complete list of commissioners I could not print up before the meeting. Who else are we missing here? Commissioner Davis, we've got Dell, Kadena. Is there anybody else who's missing? I know we're missing a couple. So we're supposed to have 17. 9, 10, 11, 12. That's right. Kalpakoff is here. Okay, so we're missing Valle and Ferrante.
And also Guerra.
And Osaguera, that's right. Okay, and he told me he's got construction going on at his house. He will do his best to be here, but he's going to have to be coming and going because of that. You know, it is dealing with contractors in your house. So hopefully he'll pop back in pretty soon. So with that, it looks like we've got a quorum. Out of our 17, we've got 14, and then we'll note in the record when they do arrive. So with that, we'll move on to it.
Oh. And Schneider is also not.
Oh, that's right. Ann Schneider. I'm missing Commissioner Schneider. Is that somebody who's on? Let's see. The chat function is working. Attendees. I do not see. Yeah. So hopefully people can mute yourselves when you're not speaking. But that'll save time if we don't have to go through the roll call every time. Okay. So we'll move on to agenda item number 2, which is review and potential approval of the meeting minutes. Hopefully everybody got a chance to look at those. Does anybody have any edits to the meeting minutes, or would you like to make a motion to approve them?
I'll make a motion to approve. Oh.
Okay. May I have a second? I think it was Jeff.
I'll second it.
Okay. We don't put that in the notes anyway, but thank you. Thumbs up. Everybody's good with those. Perfect. Okay. So we'll go ahead and approve the meeting minutes from the last meeting, and then we'll keep moving. And our goal, again, is to keep this to 2 hours, which I think will be easy to do today. And we'll go ahead on to agenda item number 3, which is public comment review for items not on the agenda. I have a few things under this, but I'd also like to ask Cal Recycle if you could please let us know if there's other public comments that have come in very recently that we might not have seen.
There have been no public comments that have come in.
Okay. Well, that makes it easy. So I'll go ahead and just refer to a couple things. Commissioners yesterday got an email from Cal Recycle staff from a company called Digimarc, which I have uploaded to the Google document. They are a company that does watermarking technology. They're publicly listed on the NASDAQ exchange, and they create a digital identifier for any type of printed label, package, or plastic container. They would like to give plastics and other packaging a digital recycling passport, and noted in our proposals on labeling, they want to make sure that any policy on labeling, and the one we did, policy item number 15, that it address this issue. Our request is that digital watermarking be recognized as an acceptable label method alongside traditional labeling in the policy proposals that will be put to the legislature regarding labeling. And they want to just make sure that language leaves sufficient space for innovations this made sense to me because as they mentioned, if we go to eco-modulated fees and material types change quickly, the watermarks could easily be changed in the computer a lot faster than a hard label on a piece of material. So would we like to refer this letter to the labeling committee to see if they want to address this letter and update the policy? Commissioner Dell, are you okay with that? Thumbs up. Okay. So that means that letter will be referred over to the labeling and public education committee for follow-up and possible changes to the labeling recommendation. The other comment that we got was actually a proposal on fees from the California Compost Coalition, Evan Edgar and his group. And I did upload that to the Google document yesterday. And I do believe that's probably appropriate, but I'm open to any ideas on this to refer over to the Organics Committee to tackle this. Is that amenable with the group? Thumbs up. Eric, the committee chair, is okay with it? Okay. So that proposal will be referred to the Organics Committee to be taken up hopefully at the next meeting and discussed and can be reported back to us on that. And then with that, I don't have any other public comments. So I guess we can go ahead and if there's none still from the public, CalRecycle?
Still none.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to agenda item number 4. This is where we had the bulk of our time for the committee reports. And I've only received a couple of the written committee reports, so I uploaded those. So I think we can start with the ones who actually filled that out. I think it was market development, John, and then we'll go with recycling, and then we'll go with labeling and organics after that, and then the 2-person committee. So why don't we go ahead and start with Commissioner Davis on the Market Development Committee. Is there anything you'd like to add to what you or highlight from your report out?
Well, I can summarize the report. I could show it on my screen if you'd like, and kind of jump to the.
I think everybody can read it. Maybe we could just highlight the key parts of where the committee's at.
Okay. I think the key parts are that we are working on material-specific policies. So the focus from kind of the initial broader issues around permitting has now moved to more materials focus. So we've been receiving and have scheduled presentations into next month. We had a presentation on drywall at our last meeting. We had presentations on asphalt at the prior meeting. We had a presentation on carpet at the request of one of the carpet companies. I think our consensus is we're not revisiting the carpet issues. The CARE was item was heard yesterday at the CalRecycle meeting, and I think the Carpet Advisory Committee meets next week. So we're at this point, we're not revisiting. We have no reason to revisit the carpet recommendation. We are looking, again, possibly at the state agency by recycle recommendation that came to you and was approved by the commission. But that was dependent on a meeting after our last meeting. Our last committee meeting with Caltrans, and so we'll hear about that on Monday, whether there's going to be an update or proposed update to the state agency by recycle campaign recommendation. So basically, at this point, we're looking at construction and demolition materials such as drywall. We're looking at certification of recycling rates that's included in that discussion. Glass minimum content. We'll have a presentation on our April 12th meeting from the Glass Packaging Institute on minimum content. Right now, the statute requires bottles sold in California to meet a minimum content. I'm sorry, manufactured in California to meet a minimum content regulation, as opposed to the plastic beverage container minimum content, which is bottles sold or containers sold in California. So we're going to have a discussion with GPI about that. We had a textile presentation at our last meeting, and I expect to receive a draft of a proposed language around textiles recycling at institutional and hospitality uses, particularly hospitality uses. So we're kind of carving out a segment of textiles that's more easily manageable, and hope to bring that forward to you possibly at your next meeting. Fiber-derived personal care products, we'll have a presentation on Monday about that. Commissioner Medrano's organized that presentation, and then we'll see if we have a proposal coming forward for you in April around that topic. Commissioner Toyota and I have been looking at the general plan guidelines, and we'll probably have a comment on Monday about that. I think the issue there is the frequency or infrequency of updating the general plan guidelines and providing advice to local governments around our issues on a more timely basis. But we'll be discussing that Monday. We do have language from Commissioner Toyota and Potashner on the producer's role in market development. So we're going to be hearing that Monday and hope to bring that forward soon, possibly the Commission's next meeting. Commissioner Schneider is to be working on reusable food packaging policy. She was unable to attend the last meeting, so I don't have a firm update on that. So of the 6 items that I'm sure will be coming forward, I think they're all close. Some we'll be hearing on Monday for your next meeting, and then others will be may not be ready quite that soon, but we hope to meet the deadline by the end of April. The one thing that's coming up is we're getting proposals initiated, just as you saw on the tip fee reform, initiated by outside the commission, and we're actually actively soliciting and accepting those proposals on these market development products. So I think we're going to probably propose a slight revision to the format to identify who initiated the proposal if it's outside the commission. It's still going to be reviewed and managed by the committee. So, we'll still be able to identify authors from the committee, commissioners who worked on the issue, but non-commissioners are actually initiating these. And so,
Okay, I think that's pretty simple.
Modification.
Any committee that gets, or if we get a proposal from outside, I think what we'll do is just at the very top, just put who actually submitted that proposal, and then we'll put which committee got it and what dates that they heard it, and then what dates the commission heard it. And that's a very good idea. We should make sure it's all clear who's been working on these.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you for
that's it for us. We meet on Monday, and then every 2 weeks. So holding to that schedule.
9:30 to 12, I think. Great. Thank you. Okay, so we'll go ahead then and move on from market development. If there's no questions on that, I don't see anything in the chat. How about, who was next? I think it was Jeff Dunleavy. I think you had a presentation for us today. Commissioner Dunleavy?
Yes, good morning. Thank you. If you could bring up the slides.
Cycle, can you pull up the slides, or would you like me to do it?
They weren't sent to me. I can make whoever the presenter, though.
Okay, let me pull them up because they're on the Google document. Let's see. Commission. Okay, so I have it open on my computer, and then I'll have to go back and have you make me, share screen. Thank you.
Alrighty, thank you. Well, the recycling committee, we met last Friday on March 12th, and one of the key tasks for the commission and for the committee was to identify what is recyclable in California and come up with that list. So whether it's a labeling issue or a collection issue, the state can have a recommended list of what is recyclable. And the phrase I keep using is hopefully it could be used by all the haulers and all the cities, to quote Commissioner Ward, to reset their programs, to pull material out that wasn't being recycled, didn't have markets, or was causing contamination or other hazardous issues. So I'll go through these slides kind of quickly. It's kind of reviewing what we've addressed at the commission in the past. And then at the end, I'll take questions.
Can you see
And with
my
the-
screen? Because I don't see it.
Yeah, we can.
Oh, okay, great.
Can you go to the next slide? And with the commission, on an annual basis, we'll review the what is recyclable list and update it as appropriate. But identifying what is recyclable, making sure that it's accepted by a majority of the local collection programs, it's collected by the recyclers. A key item is separated by MRFs into individual material types. It's processed into a manufacturing input. It's used to create something new. Has market demand and maintains value, and it's non-toxic, doesn't contaminate products. If we go to the next slide. We had done an initial survey with a lot of help from Commissioner Dell, but identifying 76 MRFs in California, looking at drop-off collection programs, looking at literature and other publicly available information. And we looked at bale pricing, and we came up with a matrix. Green was something that passed or achieved the threshold. Red did not. Yellow was something that had potential. So if we go to the next slide. And then we came up with the initial survey results of the 15 items that I think everybody is saying is recyclable and has markets. They've been doing these items for a long time. I don't think there's any question that these are the items that should be on the list. If we go to the next slide. Then we've had active discussion on quite a few items. Aseptic cartons. We haven't gotten any actual recycling data as far as facilities that are sorting them, quantities, aluminum and steel cans. We're not, aluminum and steel aerosol cans were not included on the list because of potential fire and explosion, safety concerns at the facilities. Yes, there are magnets that are pulling them out, but with the facilities that have the magnets and they were accepting aerosols, I point out that most of those facilities also have fire extinguishers by the balers because aerosols, whether they're, some people might think they're non-flammable, but there's a lot of flammable aerosols that get into the stream. So we don't include them on the list. We also looked at PET jars, rigid containers. They're not as recyclable as the PET bottles. We talked about PET thermoforms and clamshells. We've had stakeholders do presentation, but there was very limited recycling data on the amount that is being sorted by the different facilities. Same with HDPE, jars and rigid containers. It's accepted quite a bit, but definitely limited markets for that. The number 2 bottles, there's a very good infrastructure in California to reclaim that material and turn it into something new. But when it comes to the rigid containers, those markets are much more limited. And then we've had discussion on the number 5 PP bottles, jars, rigid containers. The acceptance rate is pretty high, but limited markets and limited data. A lot of that material was sorted into a 3 through 7 bale. It's really unknown how much of that material was recycled. So if we go to the next slide. And then one of the things that I brought up was a tool that we could use that gives us quantifiable data on what's being recycled out there. And all the recycling centers that generate over 100 tons of material per quarter, are required to report on the RDRS system. So all the major MRFs, every quarter, they have to report all the material that they have sorted and shipped to end markets. They have to identify whether it went in-state, out-of-state, or whether it was exported. So it's good evidence on what material the facilities are actually sorting. So I contacted the RDRS people to ask them for some information on some of the items that we've had active discussion on. So if we go to the next slide, please.
I'll let you know, Commissioner Lapis had his hand up, so whenever you're ready.
So again, with the RDRS system, there's numerous facilities that have to do the reporting, and they actually click a box at the end, under penalty of perjury, all the information is accurate. So all the recycling facilities have to do the reporting. So it should give the state good and accurate information as to the recyclable material that was recovered during that quarter or that year. So if we go to the next one. So the two items that I had asked about were clamshells and polypropylene, and asked for third quarter of 2019 through the second quarter of 2020. So we got a full year recent data, and they only showed that 944 tons of clamshells were reported through the system. And with the PP bottles, there's 4 different grades that they track. PP bottles, polypropylene, rigids, and rigid smalls. Some facilities call it PP, some people call it bottles. So we just looked at all 4 of those grades. And there was only 12,000 tons that were reported through the system. But it's interesting to note one of the weaknesses of the RDRS system is material can be counted multiple times. So if a facility sells to a broker, the broker is also required to report, so that 20 tons of material is reported by the facility that shipped it to the broker, and then the broker reports the same 20 tons. So there's potential for double counting. So the numbers that we're looking at are probably actually lower. So these are the high numbers. So we still don't have a really solid number, but these are surprisingly low as far as the amount of material. Just as a reference point, for aluminum cans, just in the CRV program, each year there's approximately 200,000 tons of aluminum cans that are recovered through the CRV program, through buyback centers and curbside programs. So these 2 items have, I think, a long way to go before they demonstrate that they're actively sorted. If we go to the next slide. So then on the number of facilities that actually reported sorting and shipping the material, clamshells only had 5. And I think most people know that the clamshells are ending up in the PET bottle bales. And we've had some active discussion on that. The thermoform people would really like to get those items removed. There's a bill by Assemblymember Ting to get some post-consumer content on thermoforms, but the challenge is getting that material out of the bales, because right now, when they're in the PET bottle bales, the MRFs are able to claim CRV and processing payments, which is much greater than the scrap value offered by the people wanting to buy the thermoforms and clamshells. And then once that material is mixed in with the PET bales, when it gets to a bottle reclaimer, it's unknown if that material is landfilled or reprocessed. Then when we look at the number of facilities for the polypropylene material, again, the number that we're looking at is probably lower, because the same load that, and I'll say if it was shipped from a facility in Monterey to the Mings facility and we ship through a broker, that material can be claimed 2 or 3 times. So the actual number of facilities sorting polypropylene is very low. And I think we're looking at a threshold 75% of the facilities accepting it and sorting that material. So I think those two items have a long way to go before they can get onto the what is recyclable list. Next slide, please. So at the end of the discussion, I think the recycling committee came to a consensus that this is the final recommended list. Then we will be reviewing the information on an annual basis to see if there's more materials that are being sorted. And the challenge will be for the people that want to be on this list to work with the recycling facilities to make sure that the material, if it's locally added, is being sorted and shipped to market, and it's not being mixed with other material where the ultimate outcome is unknown. So this is the final list that we're recommending that we would include in the final report in June. So with that, take questions. Commissioner Lapis.
Hey, thanks, Jeff, for the presentation. For everybody else on the commission, I don't know if you've been following our committee meetings. I'm sure you have better stuff to do than sit in on our subcommittee as well. But, you know, we really did talk in depth about each of the sort of gray area questionable items. And to my satisfaction, I think the questions have been answered. I don't think any of those gray area items are recyclable statewide. I don't think we could say with a straight face that any of them are recyclable statewide, although I think there's a path forward for some of them. So I just wanted to thank Jeff for putting up with a lot of really detailed, wonky conversations about a lot of individual products, and say that I support the list of 15.
Okay, thank you. And the pathway is important. The destination is getting on the list, and the pathway is meeting the criteria. So for the producers of that material, they're going to have to cut their own path. We don't have to do the work for them. They need to go to the facilities and work with those facilities, providing equipment, optical sorters, bins, higher value for material, whatever it takes to get more facilities to sort it and start reporting it to demonstrate that the material is actually being sorted and sent to end markets. So, Commissioner Davis.
So, thanks, Jeff. So we sent forward policy recommendation, I think in December. Or is that going to come back? Is it being modified, or is it done?
I think this would be the final list on the report that comes out in June.
So what we did in December will come back to us, be reviewed.
I'm not following.
I thought we adopted something around this in December, a policy with the understanding that we were going to look at that on-ramp, how to get on. So are we going to be picking up the policy that went forward in December?
I would say yes.
Okay. So some of what I've had some questions or comments in the past, and I'll wait, I guess, to have a chance to revisit them. But remind you, one question specifically was on the 901 data, whether the 3.7 data was included, and do you have any data on the mixed bales that were being made then? So given the time frame that the reporting was done, was there data on the 3.7 bale?
I did not ask for information on the 3 through 7 because with the 3 through 7 material, we don't know what the end destination was, and we don't know if any of it was actually recycled.
Yeah,
so
I understand that, but my point from the earlier discussion was during that time period, a lot of MRFs were still making 3.7 bales, selling them, shipping them. with all the issues around that. So the polypropylene and some of the other materials potentially were included in those 3.7 bales. And so the presentation we heard at Market Development Committee identified that shift from 3.7 to separated number 5s. The time frame that you're giving us data around, the first set looked at 3.7, the second set only looks at polypropylene. So there's this big market shift, and I think we just need to be able to address it. It was brought up in the presentation to the commission, in the presentation that was shared with the Market Development Committee. So in the text, I think we need to identify that. It seems to me to be a kind of a shortfall in the data. It's not available, but 5 was being sent out in those bales at the time. I think it would be helpful to have a little more precision between those criteria that were identified and the analysis. For example, the analysis shows limited markets, limited data, but those are not, it's not clear how that is reflected in the criteria. And what I think would be useful would be to do a check, where did those materials fall short against the criteria, rather than convert the criteria to some other language. Limited markets has a,
and that's
a lot of
yeah, and that's what we can do moving forward. As more facilities are sorting the material, that will demonstrate that there is a sustainable market for that material. But I don't think we need to look backwards on why it fell short. I think the consensus is we do have 15 strong items that should be on the list, and identifying the criteria of higher acceptance, more facilities sorting the material and marketing the material. I have done a public records request on the one and only secondary MRF in California that was doing the sorting of the 3 through 7 bales. Facility information is protected, but this facility is now out of business. And I've just asked one specific question that's under legal review right now, is did that facility report shipping any number 5 in that time period, to see if that item was actually sorted from the secondary MRF. And that would kind of give us an indication if secondary MRFs and a 3 through 7 bale might be considered in the future. But we won't get that information from any overseas secondary MRFs. But again, it's under legal review to see if they can just answer the question, did the one and only secondary MRF in California actually sort number 5 material?
Yeah, so I guess my point was that there's kind of a disconnect between the criteria that are laid out and the analysis. The analysis uses different terms, different phraseologies. So I think it just to draw the line completely. Where did they fall short against the criteria? When you're given the analysis, the language is different, and so that obscures some of the recommendation. You also mentioned the financial data, and I think that's, if we're going to rely on financial data in pricing, we need to be able to verify that. I'm not comfortable saying, the value falls short, because values fluctuate, and there's values. I think there have been values for materials that are on that list that probably fall short of the recovery value. So if we're going to rely on financial data, same thing. We ought to be able to demonstrate that. And then I guess my last point is one that I brought up before. The SB 1335, CalRecycle, uses different criteria, and they have a different analysis, and they have a different threshold. And I think since we're working under an obligation to address the same statute, I think we need to be able to explain why our recommendations and the framework for our recommendations differ from CalRecycle's recommendations. And then I think, at some point we need to close that gap. If the commission's going to once a year pick things up and say they meet the threshold, and CalRecycle has under the same statute, a different threshold, different set of criteria, and possibly a different list, I think that can be, that's going to be confusing. So I've made that point before and think it's still valid. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Really quickly, Commissioners, comment from Kate Wilkins saying that some information has been requested by Jadon Levy on 3 through 7. Similar to the polypropylene data, and CalRecycle will be responding shortly. So hopefully that will clarify this in the future.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Commissioner Sky.
Thank you. I'm glad we're spending time on this topic because it's probably one of the most consequential decisions that we'll make. It's going to affect a lot of industries. And ideally, if we're successful, what gets a label for recyclables will be placed in the recycling bin and everything else will be placed in the trash. And the reason that I'm a little concerned about that is, for example, the polypropylene is the material that is being recovered. Thousands of tons of material is being recovered per year. And again, if we're successful in what we're trying to do, that will now all shift to the trash bin. So I want to make sure that we're setting these thresholds in a way that facilitates continued recyclables and doesn't further damage the recycling industry, which has been battered already for the last few years. I don't know that comparing the numbers to aluminum cans, for example, is a good comparison because there's a CRV program with billions of dollars in incentives that helps to prop up that that material, and the density is different. So we really should be focusing on a material by material collection. There certainly isn't as much polypropylene even sold into the marketplace as there are aluminum cans, would be my guess. So we should be looking at how much is being put out there and how much is recovered as a way to evaluate it. And I also wonder if the 75% threshold is the right threshold for facilities, because some facilities are going to gather a lot more material or might specialize in recovering material and therefore be a pull for it. So I would think a better metric would be the percentage of material that's being collected versus what's being placed out for collection. And I don't know if the RDRS is capable of measuring that. Certainly would need to get better at avoiding the double counting if we're really going to do that kind of analysis.
Okay, and with that, I think that's where the producers can help. Because we've asked the producers a lot of questions, you know, the number of facilities, tons collected, tons produced, and they provided 11 pages of answers. And I think a lot of the answers were, we don't have that data, it's beyond the scope, we don't know. So I agree with you, it'd be nice to hear that, but if the producers want to label their product as recyclable, they're going to have to help us along the way. They have to carve their own pathway because the destination is what they want. They want to be on the list. With the material, we understand the impact it could have on materials out there, but we don't want to have anything that's misleading the public. I think Senator Allen has a bill out there, and I'll just quote from it, you know, we want to make sure that the environmental marketing claim, whether explicit or implied, should be sustained by competent and reliable evidence to prevent deceiving or misleading consumers about the environmental impact of plastics or products. So we need to make sure it's factual, and the facts and the data that we have show that PP5 or thermoforms, unfortunately, is not sorted at very many facilities, and the volume is very, very little. In fact, a lot of programs are starting to pull material out of their curbside programs. I think City of Long Beach eliminated 3 through 7 because they're trying to protect their number 1 plastic, their number 2 plastic, and their fiber grades from contamination. And that's the whole goal of the commission, is to help clean up the curbside stream. I think there's one city down in Stockton that is actually starting to fine residents for putting contaminated items that are not included in the program, including PP5. So we need to protect the statewide stream. If there's local programs that are able to do it, that's great. I hope they continue to do it, and I hope the producers work with all the facilities in California to install the equipment and technology so it's a viable solution for the local facilities to begin sorting more material at a quality level that has a sustained market. And with PP5, even in their response, they said it's an emerging market. It's only been around for 10 years. The comparison of aluminum cans in the CRV program, but aluminum cans are being sorted and recycled in Texas, in Kentucky, in Alabama, and Ohio. Steel, if we were to look at the RDRS system, of the 201 solid waste facilities, my guess is over 190 solid waste facilities are sorting steel. And steel has seen market prices go up, market prices go down. But steel from solid waste facilities, at least every solid waste facility I've been to, they all sort steel because the market's there. The same can be said for cardboard. So for PP5, for thermoforms, I think the producers need to start carving the path and working with the facilities to get the material sorted before they get on the statewide what is recyclable list. So, Commissioner Potashner.
And you touched on this a little bit, especially for the items that are sort of on that pathway, Jeff. The RDRS system right now is not too prescriptive on reporting requirements for MRFs when it comes down to like resin type. Gives a lot of leeway to each MRF on how they report into the system. Do you imagine that there should be some review of what those requirements are so that we have better data as we're looking at different material types?
Yeah, you hit on a key point. Commissioner Lapis talked about, the wonky discussion we had, and to the credit of the RDRS staff, they put together an incredibly complex system, and I'm guessing that they have 400 different commodity types in there. So even for PP5, I think they gave you 5 selections for it, when it should probably be 2, bottles and rigids. So I think moving forward, having discussions with the RDRS people to reduce the number of selections to the commonly known commodity types. So PET is in there 10 or 12 times. So I think having discussions with them will help. So the facilities know these are the types you should be selecting and reporting on. So it gets it a little more accurate. So, Commissioner Medrano.
A quick question. So secondary MRF is also double reporting in a way?
Yes. So if a facility and I'll say in Northern California shipped 3 through 7 to a secondary MRF in Los Angeles, and then that secondary MRF did some sorting, and then they shipped 3 through 7 out of there, that same material would be counted twice. And that's one of the weaknesses of the RDRS system. And I think that's one of the solutions that we've talked about, is having the originating facility report the destination, where the material is actually going to end up. So if they're selling to a broker, it doesn't get double counted.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ward.
There we go. Thank you so much for your work on this. 2 quick questions. One is, again, trying to make a system somewhat idiot-proof. I noticed both number 1 and number 2 were limited to bottles. And so my question is about tubs. And can you talk a little bit more about why wide mouth containers, even if they're number 1 or 2, are not included on the recycling list, and how you think the outreach should work? Because, for instance, trying to distinguish both the number and the container type is a complication that confuses a lot of people. Number one or number two, we can look for the number. Bottle, I understand that. A bottle that's number one or number two, you've lost me. You know what I mean? So your thoughts on that?
Commissioner Dell has a
why are tubs out is the first.
Bottles are blow molded through the process, and then the tubs and the buckets, they're an injection. So there's a difference in the chemical structure. It's the same type, but the structure is more rigid, and they won't melt down and reprocess at the same level. A lot of the rigids might have a barrier material in them because the buckets will have different material types that might be a little more acidic, so they treat them a little differently. So they're number one, but structurally they're different.
Okay.
So, I mean, I would almost say, I'm trying to think of a good example, just missing it right now. But structurally they're different, and the processing is done differently. Maybe the example is a glass bottle versus a water glass. They're both glass,
right?
But they're structurally different. Pyrex, kind of the same thing. Pyrex is heated and cooled. It's a glass item, but the structure of the items have been changed, so they can't be recycled together.
Okay, so tapping into sort of the Digimarc discussion, to me, we still need a very quick and easy way to have folks with a very low level of education, perhaps a low competency in English, being able to distinguish what is recyclable and what's not. And that is an ongoing need. And whether it's something you can look at on your phone, something that's clear in labeling, we still need to get there, and we're far away. And then the second thought, and then I'll close out, which is perhaps not in this June report, but perhaps in subsequent editions. I think it would be very helpful to have the Recycling Committee make recommendations to how the RDRS system might be improved. Clearly, you're weighing in on it, you're looking at it carefully, and you're giving really valuable critiques about how it can be improved. And I really want to make sure that those concepts aren't lost and that they're somehow formally suggested to CalRecycle.
Yeah, and being able to distinguish what is recyclable, what isn't. I think removing the chasing arrows, I think that's going to get a lot of support because it'll get removed from plastics, most of which are not recyclable at this point. So I think that's going to help. And then with the RDRS system, definitely I think the Recycling Committee can have some discussions with the RDRS staff on how to simplify things for the reporting facilities to get more consistency and more accuracy moving forward. Commissioner Toyota.
Yeah, thank you. I think you guys did a great job. I can't imagine how hard it was or had to have been to bring this down to this list, and I really appreciate your work. The only part that concerns me is that, if this goes through, then again, we could lose some smaller markets. And I absolutely believe that the producers need to get on that list on their own and work toward that. So we're kind of thinking that, from what I understand, is that they're going to want to, so they'll do it. And I just don't necessarily believe that. So as much as I think this is a great policy, I think it needs to be married to another policy that says, if you're not on this list, this is what you're going to have to do. And you're going to have to do this until you get on the list, or have some kind of incentive or penalty for not being on the list that would keep these producers working toward getting on that list, rather than just thinking that they want to be and they will.
Okay, I think the ultimate incentive is going to be being able to label their item recyclable in California. I mean, because we're the driver for a lot of things nationally, and to be able to call themselves recyclable in California, I think is going to be a huge benefit to those producers that can generate products that are recyclable in California. So that'll be the incentive for them. As far as the penalty,
enough incentive?
I would hope so. I mean, I would hope so. As far as the penalty, I don't know that we're looking at that. We would like more items to get on the list. And I think in the next few years, especially with some of the more active items, it'll be good to see what the producers do to help the facilities sort this material more. You know, what will the producers do to incentivize more facilities to segregate thermoforms? What will they do to help the facilities segregate the PP5 material? And again, whether it's from Blythe all the way up to Crescent City, we have facilities that if there is a market for it and it makes sense, I'm sure they would do it. And I think that's going to be the responsibility for the producers to provide those incentives to many more facilities than the few that are just doing it right now.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Dell.
Hi from Houston, everybody. So first of all, I'd like to thank Commissioner Lapis for his vote of support, because he did kick the tires in every meeting on this, and for his support on the fact that we really looked at science-based data, collected as much data as we could. To look at this objectively means a lot to me. So I'd like to thank Commissioner Lapis for that. Then I'd like to offer a few facts in response to some comments. Commissioner Davis mentioned the time frame of when plastics have been sorted and when there's been a change in market for 3 through 7s. At the beginning of 2018 was when National Sort actually came into effect, and the market for 3 through 7s going there really died off. And so when we started collecting the data through the RDRS system, it was another 1.5 years after that. So it wasn't right at the beginning of when China Sort hit. An important point to Commissioner Sky is this isn't a binary list. You're either recyclable in California or you're not. This list is what is the statewide, across the state, top to bottom, constant market, not spot market, but these things are recyclable day in, day out, top to bottom, side to side in California. Now, there's markets, spot markets locally for additional items. What we need to make sure is that cities are really ensuring that there are markets, that they're pressuring their haulers to take something, that it's not just a competition to be who's most green, right? But this isn't a binary list that if you're not on this list, you're not recyclable in California. We want to encourage the spot market to become a widespread, long-term, day in, day out demand for all the things that are on that didn't make it on the list. So there is this room to be a local ad. Call it what you will. Commissioner Sky, you also asked, well, what percentage of the materials is it? And I actually did the math on that. The US EPA publishes annual reports by material type of residential plastic waste. It's the Sustainable Materials Management Report, and Table 8 is about plastics. And I went and scaled the national numbers to California's population, and then divided the 12,000 tons, just assuming that wasn't double counted, but we know it was probably somewhere in there. And for all polypropylene waste made in California, the 12,000 tons would have been 1.2%. We just look at non-durables, meaning like take out the car bumpers and stuff like that, but non-durables include PP5 packaging, plates, cups, clamshells. Then that 12,000 tons would have been 2.7%. So it's a low number. And there is a way to do the math on it if you believe the US EPA data, which I do. And then lastly, I'll say, calling in from Texas, where we had 4 pipes freeze and $4,000 spent trying to get it all going, there's been a force majeure through this town. And my friends, my other chemical engineer friends like me, who are all out working in the refineries and in the processing facilities, had to cite force majeure and not ship plastic. And so we've seen price spikes in the last month. But trust me, it's 75 degrees today. It was 80 degrees yesterday, and all those plants are coming back online. And so the spot market prices are not something that we can rely on to say that there's long-term demand. What we need to do through all this analysis and through what Commissioner Ward just said and what Commissioner Toyota just said is to develop long-term statewide demand and get the producers to get involved in doing that. And the clamshell people have tried. They've built a $41 million facility and they're offering, I think, 9 cents a pound, and they're trying. And that's what producers need to do to get that label. And yes, hopefully the label will be valuable because there's a lot of brands saying that they're going to use only recyclable items. And so that brand is important. And it's really important that we do use every fact-based, science-based, government-based data so that this is really, a factual assessment of what truly is recyclable, top to bottom, state, across the state. And lastly, again, if you're not on the list, doesn't mean you're not recyclable. It means there's spot markets and it takes work to get to the statewide. Thank you.
Can I just clarify my comments about percentage recovered? I was meaning of what's placed in the curbside bin, because if we do an assessment for most materials, if there isn't some kind of a producer responsibility program that incentivizes recovery or pre-recovery fee, recovery rates are abysmal for just about every material type there is. So I think across the board, number 1 and number 2 plastics are probably below 10% recovery also, aside from the CRV program, which inflates that number.
Okay. And with Commissioner Dell, the long-term demand is very important, and that's the incentive for the facilities to sort it, but there also has to be long-term supply. And I think that's the biggest question mark for a lot of these materials, is they can show that there's been pricing for an item for the last several years, but I don't think there's been any demonstration or any evidence of long-term supply. Even the people that responded to the questions for PP5, they said it's an emerging market. It's an emerging material. I just think at this point we can say that the data shows they're not there yet, and if they want to get there, they're going to have to work with more facilities to help them and incentivize them, whether again it's through equipment, bins, or pricing, to get them to sort the material so there is a long-term stable supply of material. And if they could site a facility in California, that would be even better. For the number 1 bottles and number 2 bottles, California has a wonderful infrastructure to recycle all those materials here, and that's creating jobs here in California and reducing truck trips going to the east or export loads going offshore. So after Commissioner Dell, hold on. Commissioner Dell. Commissioner Davis. Commissioner Davis?
Oh,
back again?
Yeah, just real quickly, the Long Beach, you cited Long Beach as dropping 3 7s, which they did, and as a number of others have, but Long Beach added 5 as a separate material. So I think that's the shift, and I think we all recognize that. Yeah, how do we accommodate that? So thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Kopelkoff.
This list was a tough list to get down to, the 15, and there are some definitely some questionable material types that are maybe in the gray area or not on the list today. I think it's in our subcommittee, I think it's going to be one of our goals is to find out that pathway to get them on that list. And we've heard today a little bit about the RDRS system and the reporting there. That data is new. The reporting is complicated. And there, you can choose plastic instead of PP5s as well as a commodity when you ship it. So I found that out myself. I'm looking at a report that we shipped PP5 as plastic. And so it's going and tweaking our system internally, knowing that, you really have to look at that PO and find out what kind of plastic it is. It says plastic on it, but under, small writing underneath, it says the PP5 on there. So I think addressing that with Cal Recycle is going to be one of our goals. And we will see, and it's using a lot of data, not just the reporting system from Cal Recycle. We can certainly use some of Jan Dell's great information that she and her group works on with the EPA, but it's getting the local MRFs and the guys on the streets that are actually doing it. And I want to make one other comment, and I'll leave it there, that, we do sort PP5. That's it. We've done it for years, but we have the technology to do it as well. And as we see these more MRFs in California add some optical sorting, some more technology, you're going to see these different plastic streams being basically separated at that level, or when the price comes up where you can add more manual labor to pull it out. And if there's a market for it and it's not on that list, the MRFs are still going to pull it out and they're going to recycle it. And the last thing is that, this is a recommendation to the state. And where this list of 15 goes, it should go to the manufacturers, that they are not on the list, number one. But how long is it going to take to hit our residents, right? So I think we have time to refine it. And if there are different markets that do pop up, and they're all the local ads. So we're going to keep it in our local ads for our 40 jurisdictions that we serve. And know that that's still a possibility, Commissioner Davis, to keep it locally. And, my goal is to keep these markets going and to find real data and accurate data so we can make better decisions on this commission.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Commissioner Valle.
Thank you, Jeff. We've been in the recycling committee, we've talked about CRV and what is recyclable and what isn't, and then we came up with this list of recommendations. In the 70s, when we were in business, we recycled aluminum cans, glass bottles, newspaper, and cardboard. And that was and tin cans and steel cans. And that was the essence of what we picked up in 5-gallon buckets at the curbside when a curbside program started. But since then, and the only thing that was really plastic were the buckets themselves, which manufacturers use to create the plastic containers. Then with the advent of plastics and cheaper oil and the industry of plastics, the water bottle showed up out of nowhere. And so one of my concerns is that we as a commission, while sanctioning 1 and 2 and other plastics, simultaneously are perpetuating the use of plastics, which is detrimental to the earth and detrimental to our environment, to our oceans, our waterways, etc. So I would like to say, for example, if there are alternatives, and there is an alternative to number 1 PET plastic water bottles. It's a very simple device called an aluminum can. And the difference between the two is, our center recycles from 4 to 6 tons of plastic water bottles per day. One-time use plastic water bottles. One-time use. And that's why we have such pristine, beautiful bales that go directly to the manufacturer, because they've only been used once. They really look nice in the pile, and the pile is huge. In fact, I personally have headlong dived into the pile like I'm diving into water and totally evaporated into the water bottles. It's fun. But set that aside, I think that we really have to have a serious conversation. There are manufacturers of aluminum cans that can make water bottles out of aluminum cans with caps that are recyclable, just like the aluminum can for beverage containers. And that not only is a more productive use of resources, but it's more lucrative in our recycling markets. We're getting from 6 to 8 cents a pound for PET, and we're getting between 46 to 48 cents a pound for aluminum. So do the math. It costs more to process and bale and use wire on those PET bales than the product is worth in the open market. So we're actually losing money by handling that. If it wasn't for the handling fees that we're getting from the state, that PET bottles are a loser. And when there is such a simple alternative, such as aluminum can, which has higher value, higher resilience, I wonder if we as a commission needs to start looking at those and promoting those types of thoughts as part of our policy recommendations, and not simply accommodating the plastics industry by saying, yeah, you're good. Yeah, we have infrastructure, you're good. We have to look at the bigger picture, which I think was one of the reasons why we were formed and created, and not be afraid to hold the plastics industry accountable to what they're doing to our environment. So I'd like us to have that, first of all, I'd like the recycling committee to go back and call manufacturers of aluminum cans and call the people who create PET bottles together in the same room to have that conversation and find out, what the future of their industry is and where they're headed. I know that there are corporations in the aluminum industry that are very anxious to flip to containers made out of aluminum cans for water. And you see those in high-end hotels. People who are very conscientious about their image in the public sector are converting from PET one-time use plastic bottles to multiple use aluminum cans for water. And what a tremendous dramatic change that would be all the way around for all of us. And I think there's other alternatives for other products as well out there. We just have to invite people in to promote it and hear from their point of view. And I think there are a lot of innovators that are interested in doing something more than simply flipping the market and having lucrative products and income that have a bigger picture about the bigger issues that are in front of us that I think that we as a commission need to keep in mind when we have these conversations.
Sure, Donovan, I'm going to do a time check just so we can stay on track because so how many, I'm just letting you know we're already at 10 after 10.
All righty. Yeah, Commissioner Valle, thank you. Aluminum cans definitely a great option, and I think we've seen an increase in the reusable aluminum water bottles, and I think a lot of that has to do with the leadership from San Francisco Airport, where they banned the single-use plastic bottles at the terminals. So I think the Bay Area has seen a lot of that. I'm not familiar with the rest of the state, but definitely a good option. Anytime you could go reusables for water, and fortunately in California we do have good water. Just needs some filters out of the fridge, and that reduces plastic waste as well. So, Commissioner Snyder.
Hi, thank you, and apologies for joining late. I'm sitting in a lodge, and I'm so sorry, I'm in Yosemite right now, but there may be background noise. My comments were more, as local government, we just did our goal setting and our mid-year budget update, of which we're millions of dollars in the hole, and I couldn't get one climate action item onto the goal setting. So what I'm telling all of us right now is regardless of what we come up with, local governments are going to probably be pushing back strongly. So to go forward with a minimal list, we're going to have to sell it why it's better to local governments. And a lot of them, at least in my little city, they don't have the bandwidth. You might go to San Jose where you've got full-time elected officials and one or two of them will be environmental, really care about it, but most are not. So when we do write this, and Chair Donlevy, I'm with you here, but let's write it to make it easy for local government to take this on. That's just my one disappointment of not getting one climate change thing on goal setting. So here I am in Yosemite, licking my wounds and enjoying the snow.
Wish we were all there. Such a beautiful part of the world. Commissioner Sanborn, finally.
Well, thank you. Just a couple of things, because we will have to move on. This has been a very, very good discussion, by the way, and I'm really glad this has come back and we had time to do this. A couple questions for you, Jeff, and I want to thank you so much for all the hard work you've put on this. On aerosols, one of the things that we're hearing is that it may be an idea to break them out by hazardous aerosols versus non-hazardous aerosols. If there's non-hazardous aerosols that can be easily punctured, crushed, recycled without the threat of explosion or hazards, is it worth looking at separating those two types of aerosols?
I mean, do you think that would be realistic and understood by the consumers if they see a recycling symbol on some aerosols and not on others? And then going back to the local programs, would that be understood? I think right now, most of the curbside programs do as much as they can to emphasize hazardous waste should not be in the curbside bins, but unfortunately it gets in there. So if we have some aerosols are okay and some aerosols are not, I think the collateral damage would be aerosols that are flammable could still get in there.
And I guess we kind of already have that. I mean, we have a hazardous waste problem where household hazardous waste is getting into the trash and people are confused on what's hazardous and what isn't. And I don't think that's going to change. I think they're going to still be there. So the question is there a labeling thing or a way we can educate the public that would help us recycle more of the aerosol cans that are not hazardous and not, it's just a thought, because this came up in another venue and I thought that was an interesting way to think about it. The other thing is on thermoforms. The recycled content bill, as far as I know, does not deal with the issue that had been brought up in the recycling committee, which is about how to get these thermoforms out of the bales. I think you mentioned that, because having recycled content increase without being able to get them out of the bales is going to mean nothing. As far as, am I getting that right? In your perspective?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So our recommendation to recycle, I mean, well, we didn't do one specific to thermoforms, did we? Our policies? I'm trying to think. I don't think we did.
No.
Okay. So is the commission going to make a recommendation on the thermoforms and how to deal with them? Because I am concerned that there's something going through the legislature now that is not going to deal with the fundamental issue of how to get them out of the bales.
We did not address that anytime there was discussion on bottle bill issues. There were just so many items that were in there. I think the Assembly has begun to address it. I think there's a piece that talks about plastic quality. And then with the thermoforms, I think there's going to be some discussion in the near future how to set quality standards for PET bales to help promote the post-consumer legislation for thermoforms. So I think they'll beat us to it at this point through the pieces of legislation that are starting to move through the committees.
Okay. So we don't need to weigh in, you don't think, on that at this point? But everybody can individually on the bills as they're moving. Okay.
Correct.
And you did say something about revisiting these annually. To me, that's almost too late. There's so much that happens. I think we had talked as a commission that as a commission, if we get new information, we can update these policies at any time and share that information. So if some market changes or Cal Recycle, the same thing, we didn't mean that annually. Did we just waiting a whole year if something were to change? Okay, I just want to make sure.
No, we did mean that annually, because I was thinking that the commission would set the list and turn over the evaluation and the criteria of the Cal Recycle. But Commissioner Lapis pointed out the legislation that created the commission, and it specifically says that this commission will review and recommend on an annual basis what is recyclable.
Right, but that doesn't prohibit us from doing it more frequently. That's a bottom, not a top.
Okay.
Okay, just want to make sure we're all on the same page on that. And then I do agree with the comments about the RDRS system improvements. If there's something that we can recommend to Cal Recycle, I think that would be helpful for everybody. And you'd also talked about removing the chasing arrow symbol and how important that is. And I think you said it would get a lot of support. I wanted to let you know that the industry has come out blazing in opposition of the bill that basically is built on the recommendation of this commission, SB 343 by Senator Allen. And so much so, I was decided to put that in the folder. There's actually a folder in the Google document where those opposition letters were posted, so everybody could see what if it's a recommendation of the commission. I thought you would want to know who's coming out opposed and why and what they're saying. But one of them from the Plastics Industry Association even said that this designation would increase the material going to landfill and significantly decrease recycling. They say it's going to make it harder to recycle and goes in the wrong direction. This is simply to remove the chasing arrows off of non-recyclable, what we think is non-recyclable plastics. So I just want to put it out there. If this is the kind of help we're getting from the industry side, we're in big trouble, because we're not even on the right planet with them right now, which is very unfortunate. So I just want to make sure everybody can read those comments. And last thing, I do believe waste prevention is first. I was really glad Vice Chair Valle brought this up. We haven't seen any of the really waste prevention proposals, and I really want to start. I'm actually going to probably start working on some of these myself, because I really do feel that we are missing an opportunity to get to waste prevention first. And I do agree with that concern. So hopefully as a commission, we can work on getting some more waste prevention in here in the first report. Thanks. I think there's a public comment.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I mean, my career last 28 years has been in the recycling business. And I got on this commission to promote quality and improve the collection programs and not include material that was greenwash. We have to protect the good material that's in the bins, even at the sake of removing material that wasn't recyclable. It wasn't happening. Removing the labels, I think, is the right thing to do, because you can have a product that has some health benefits. And cigarettes, there's health benefits to smoking cigarettes. But I think we all know that cigarettes are harmful to your health. So they can't label cigarettes as healthful, even though there are some known and proven, scientifically proven benefits to smoking cigarettes. It's not good for you. There's a lot of plastic that can be recycled and deserves to have the recycling label. But there's a lot of other plastic that is not being recycled, and it's ending up in landfills. And unfortunately, in California, we've shipped a lot of plastic around the world that we don't know what happened to it. And we see pictures of islands of plastic in the ocean. So I think we have to have the standard a lot higher. And I said it, I would rather have material go into California landfills that are designed and engineered to maintain and ensure that we don't have environmental or negative environmental impacts. So the producers that want to label themselves recyclable help the local facilities, provide the technology, the equipment, and the financial incentive to do it, and then they can label themselves as recyclable in California. But until that point, I think the recycling symbols need to come off a lot of products, because it's been misleading to the public, because people think they put it in the blue bin, the recycling container, it gets recycled, and the facts and the data aren't there to prove that it actually happened. So I think we need to move forward.
Okay, Jeff, I'm going to take over if it's okay, and we'll move on to the public comment because we are going to have to keep moving at this point. This is a very good, and we do you want the recommendation of the whole commission to just proceed with this as the final, the policy as it was already written should just stay in the report is what I'm hearing? Is that what you're recommending from the committee?
Yes, this is the final list of 15 recyclable items in California.
And that policy proposal, I think we put in as a draft, but we're just going to keep it as is. They're not going to change. We're not going to change anything.
Let me take one more review of it, and then I can present it at the next commission meeting.
Yeah, I think this has been a really good discussion, and if you take a really deep dive look at it and see, do we want to change anything? If not, we should probably just bring it back one last time and let everybody just take one final look at it, and then do a double reading, and then it just goes into the final report. Great. And then the public comment, please.
So we have one public comment from Erica Daly. The comment is on 2 through 7 and polypropylene. Dear Commissioners, while I see that you have looked at past data, have you evaluated current investments for facilities that are under construction to recycle 2 through 7s, including polypropylene? Here at PreZero, we have invested several $1 million, and we'll be opening a facility to sort 1 through 7s, then wash, filter, and extrude both polypropylene and HDPE pellets for remanufacturing. It would be extremely disappointing to discourage all of the work and others in the industry who are working towards these being recycled.
I think we've heard about this before, and my suggestion to Commissioner Donlevy would be in the introduction to this section maybe is to identify that we have heard about these facilities coming online, but at the point of time that we were doing this recommendation, they are not online, and that's certainly up to the legislature to look at all of that, at the time that they decide if they want to take this up. That way it's at least in the record that we heard this comment.
Okay.
And then I think Commissioner Dell, are you next? And then Lapis?
Yeah. Just quickly, let's see. No, I'm not muted. Okay. To Commissioner Valle's point, on PET plastic, I think we all saw the news that the U.S. largest bottle recycler declared bankruptcy, Carbon Light. And there's quotes and lots of articles about how poor the pricing structure is and really how unsustainable the market is. Even before COVID, I had talked with a representative of that company and they've never turned a profit. I think we should, as a commission, because it doesn't seem like anyone else is looking at it, look at these issues around the pricing for PET. And yes, we have a recycled content mandate in California, but I look at the import and export data, and we're getting a ton of PET supposedly recycled coming in from Mexico and other countries. So and it's cheaper to do it down there, right? Labor, there's no health and safety. The idea is of creating a recycled content mandate is that it'll create less litter, less waste, jobs in California. But if we meet those recycled content mandates with cheap imports that may not actually be recycled plastic, and our plastic processors go bankrupt, then we're not achieving anything. And I'll just give Commissioner Valle a fact point that you'll love. Actually, NAPCOR, the Plastics Industry Association, actually reports when they process nationwide PET bottles, 33% of the material is actually wasted. So if you get 100 new recycled plastic bottles, that means 40 have been wasted. There's a lot of process losses in that. It's a fact you should know. But I think on the recycling committee, these are things we should look at moving forward to protect California's processors if it's possible. Yes, I know there's trade laws and we can't restrict imports, but we really have to know that are these recycled content mandates being made by our own plastic waste or not? Thank you.
Commissioner Dell, yeah, thank you for bringing up Carbon Light. Very unfortunate they were a leader, but unfortunately they couldn't make a profit. And one of the articles that I read is one of the reasons they were challenged is increasing contamination in the material. And in the last couple of years, they've tried doing more and more material coming from facilities that were exporting it, and they were trying to do it domestically, and the quality was just getting worse and worse. So we need to do everything we can to improve and protect the quality so the infrastructure that we have here in California is not challenged with contamination. So, thank you.
Comment on the logistical side of things. This is not a recommendation. I mean, we were tasked with kind of two separate things in the list. In the legislation. We were tasked with coming up with policy recommendations, and separately we were tasked with identifying a list of what is recyclable. So I think we need to make a new document that is what is recyclable statewide in California, that has this list and also has the narrative. And I think the narrative is incredibly important because it is nuanced. So I think we're all going to have to contribute to that to make it a document that we're all comfortable with. So I guess in response to the previous comments about updating the policy recommendation, this is a separate document that should be a standalone. What is recyclable?
So we have recommendation number 15 in the report that says what is recyclable. That's its title.
Yeah, we had that as a recommendation. It didn't include the list, I don't think. And I think the list needs to be a standalone document that we publish as a commission.
Well, here, we don't have support staff. So here's what I would suggest, since Ted and I ended up doing the Yeoman's version of the work on this report, is just take the report we have, update that number 15, do a nice context language that we talked about that would be put into the report for that. And we could even pull it up on the priority list, or we could put it, separately in the report that this was a whole separate recommendation. But I think the whole report was telling a story of what we were asked to do in delivering all those things. But we did attach them separately, so it was nice and easy for legislators and others to just pull it separately if they wanted to. Does that work?
I think it makes sense to have it. I know it's going to be more work, but I think it makes sense to have it as a separate list, especially since it's something we're going to be updating regularly for, into the future.
All of them are that way, though.
They are, but I think it's a little different than a policy recommendation. It is a factual assertion of what is recyclable in the whole state. I don't know, maybe I'm in the minority on that. I just think it deserves to be, even if we copied a lot of the content from that item, I think it deserves to be a standalone item of what is recyclable.
Are we going to do the same with what is compostable?
Yeah, I think it should be, and I think it should be what is recyclable and what is compostable. And I think we've done the work on what is compostable in the organics committee, so I think it's just combining the two.
You want 3 separate reports?
No. I was thinking one on, what is recyclable and compostable, and then policy recommendations.
Commissioner Davis, and then we'll get back to that on exactly the formatting.
Yeah, I'm so policy number 15 that we adopted includes language that says manufacturers who wish to demonstrate the product has become compliant with the recyclability requirement or has a clearly defined path for meeting these requirements in the short term will be provided a pathway to submit that information to the Commission for inclusion on the list. So that's what we adopted, and based on that, I was okay with number 15. If we're saying we're not going to take that up, then I think I've been misled. So, and others may feel the same way. And so that's what we adopted, and we need to do that. If we're not going to hear that, I'm concerned. So.
Is there anybody else who'd like to weigh in on the formatting? My preference would be that we just need one report with attachments that are very clear and can be separated out on any of these and updated individually. Otherwise, I think it's going to get pretty confusing, more documents. So I see some head nodding. Okay. So I think, so Jeff, you've done a great job, and that committee's done a fantastic job on this. So thank you for all your hard work. This was a really important discussion. I'm so glad we had time for it today. And so if you can go back and then look at 15 and attachment 15 to the old report, update it. And if you want to give Ted and I some context language or bring that back to your committee or to the commission to put into the report with all the nuances we've talked about, because there's so many, that would be awesome. And then we could get a really big check mark done for the commission on our to-do list. So thank
Jeff,
you very
I'd love
much.
to work with you. Jeff, I'd love to work with you on that.
Yeah, I'd appreciate the help.
Chair Sanford, I just want to clarify Commissioner Davis's point. John, were you mentioning that we should have that process for revisiting spelled out at the same time we adopt the list?
That was my understanding on 15 was that the pathway was going to come forward. And without that, I would have probably not supported 15. I don't think we can say, here's the list and everybody else go figure it out. So that's just my view. It's in there. It says we're going to do it. We should be doing it. If we don't have it, if we don't have
to
it,
give companies a way to get on and off this list. We have to have a clear sense, because that is the big concern of these companies, is they just don't see how they're ever going to get to hit recyclable if the labeling is saying throw it in the trash. And that is a very reasonable concern. We have to address that, I think. That was our plan, and that was in the original adopted policy. So I think Commissioner Donlevy and Chair, you can go ahead and take that, and you've got all this information, I think, in your head. And we look forward to seeing what you come up with. And thank you and the committee so much for all this hard work. This was fantastic. Okay, so with that, we're going to go ahead and move on. We are now at 10:30. We were hoping to end at 2 hours, but we'll see. The next item is, we can make these, I think, pretty quick. We had the Labeling and Media Committee. Commissioner Dell, did you want to give us a quick update?
Right. Quick. Yes. We are on the home stretch. Just we can see the finish line. And we have another meeting on April 13th. We have a draft policy that's been revised. It's posted on the public domain with revisions. In our last meeting, we assigned a few last tasks to people to put in the last bits of text that we need. So, and Commissioner Toyota's already gotten hers in. I know Commissioner Schneider, I think, that's the tough one, is the reuse language. And then there was a couple other little things. So we're planning to finalize this on April 13th in our meeting and say it's done, and then be able to submit it and have it done by the April 30th deadline.
Fantastic. Does anybody have any questions for Commissioner Dell on the work of that committee? No, and you are taking back that one item we had today, the letter, so you'll be working on that. Thanks. Okay, and then we've got organics. Commissioner Potashner, any update there?
Yeah, I'll make it real short. We had our meeting last week, had a presentation from the League of Cities on 1383 implementation. They conducted a survey with their members. Short answer is we're seeing some real struggles from our local jurisdictions. They have a short time frame from when the rules were adopted, 13 months to get into compliance. That means negotiating contracts, ordering equipment through whoever their vendors are, and getting those programs up and running by the end of this year. It's safe to say that I think a number of the jurisdictions are probably going to miss that deadline. They're making good faith efforts right now to speed up those negotiations and move through their processes. There has been a request, I think, to the legislature from jurisdictions for some delayed implementation. We'll see where that goes. Rate increases are going to be coming through this program, is what they found from that survey. The other part of that meeting was supposed to be having CalRecycle report in on progress on infrastructure and what's in the pipeline, due partly to a miscommunication and just CalRecycle needs a little bit more time. So our early April meeting will focus on that, as well as some issues coming at the industry from CARB with fleet electrification and end markets on the organic side. Commissioner Ward, do you have anything you want to add on that one?
Only that the rural jurisdictions that I'm affiliated with have equal, if not greater, challenges with regards to SB 1383, and particularly there's two main issues that are already coming to the fore. One of them is that it is difficult to imagine how to comply with the collection requirements without having mandatory collection. Mandatory collection in many rural areas doesn't make sense. Mandatory collection being the idea that if you live in a jurisdiction, you have to sign up for collection services. And in rural areas, many people are used to self-hauling, and self-hauling is an active part of our infrastructure. And to require everybody to sign up for collections really in many rural areas doesn't make sense. The other aspect is building the infrastructure and the conventional wisdom that if you ship materials more than 30 miles, whether it's feedstock or end product, you price yourself out of the market. And that fundamentally excludes a lot of rural areas from any sort of viable participation. So those are some of the discussions that are in play now. How this evolves is a moving target.
Is that it? So we're going to have the
committee report.
So we'll get the, I think Commissioner Schneider had a question.
I spent last week at the National League of Cities virtually, and we lobbied across the country on both the act that has been approved, the COVID Act, but for FAST, that's the term, it's Transportation and Infrastructure, and the Clean Act. Within FAST, I pushed, at least in California, for money for anaerobic digestion facilities. There's an energy component to the FAST, the Transportation Act. I know that's probably bigger than what we are with our statewide commission, but there's some likely really interesting funding mechanisms if we identify it and pull that in. So the FAST Act, I'm less familiar with the Clean Act. But keep an eye on that one. And Kobe, I tried to push for you guys down in Southern California. We met with both our senators and, at least in our case, Bay Area representatives.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so now we'll move on. Well, actually, last question. So Commissioner Potasher, we will have our definition of what's compostable in time, right?
We basically finished that work with our policy, and that's actually in the form of AB 1201 already introduced to the legislature. So we've created the criteria for what's compostable.
But that didn't make it into our last report, right?
It did.
Report.
Was it in there? The 19 compostable products?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I just want to make sure. So we're done with that one. So that one is just going to stay the same in the next report for July 1st. Okay, so yeah, okay, great. So it looks like both of those are on track, and those were some of our big to-do items. Okay, I just want to make sure we're all clear on who's doing what and that it's all going to be updated or kept the same. Okay, thank you so much. And then the two-person committees, waste prevention, Commissioner Ward?
Yeah, I'll chime in on that. And Commissioner Schneider and I haven't really had a chance to touch base recently on this. I'm working on several fronts trying to develop policy proposals on textiles, on furniture, and on white goods. And those are still in the development stages. And then we, in our divvying up of tasks, Commissioner Schneider, I'll let you talk about the ones that you're talking about. But I guess I'll also add, before I hand it off to you, that I think it might be worth revisiting the allocation of these duties, as, again, waste prevention is a very big, multifaceted beast. And even though we've divvied it up, 2 people is not quite enough for the topic area. So, Commissioner Schneider.
Thank you, Commissioner Ward. Most of mine has been research, and it's mea culpa time. My professional career has just been terribly busy right now, but I'm over the hurdle, and when I get home tomorrow, then I can concentrate for the next week on getting some writing done on the areas that I'm in. Mainly, I've been getting comments from people around the country on various reuse aspects and trying to incorporate that in. So, and I thank some of the other commissioners here who've also sent me leads on that. And it's just following up with people and getting all the information in one place. But I have done no writing, my bad.
So are we looking to have a foodware proposal? Is that in the works?
That was in the works, and foodware, you know, for Bay Area cities where we've done a lot of that work, I think it's more, now that I'm in another part of the state and seeing what's still out here, I have to come out of my own little bubble and get around to the rest of the state. So it's been a good learning experience of what we're doing out here in whichever counties I've been in the last couple of days. So yes, Ted, we will.
And I'll just, as long as we've got the full commission here, I'll make one more suggestion, which is I think it would be helpful if I could work directly with Commissioner Sanborn to develop the introduction to the waste prevention section, because again, I'm recognizing how multifaceted it is, and we're working on the main document as a whole. But I thought if we could carve that out, then we could make it progress.
Since we're on the subject, the problem with food packaging is most of it should or could be eliminated. There's not a lot of reusables out there. I know there's been a lot of talk about it on reusables, and what I told Commissioner Ward is with COVID right now, a lot of the reusable systems are shut down. So it's been hard to do anything, and I think we're getting beyond where we're worried about so many things. But I think it's going to take a few more years for people to come back and trust reusables.
Travel Cycle just approved 4 grants yesterday that are pretty cool, reusable projects with foodware. So,
and they sent me their grants. So looking through that, it's just acceptance. It's public acceptance.
I'll give you some information too, Commissioner Schneider. I've been talking to the City of Toronto that's doing a circular, Circular Chicago we're part of, but also Circular Toronto. And they're working with their local businesses on reuse and promoting those businesses and networking them and getting them funding. And I thought it was a really cool model, but it's about circular cities is the framing, even though it's truly waste prevention as well.
Oh,
so I'll go ahead and send that information to you.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. So, and then again, commissioners and the public, if anybody's got great ideas, we've put the format up on the Google Doc, and anybody can submit a policy proposal, even if it's on an item. If you're ahead of us and you want to submit it, just go ahead, submit it to the groups. 2-person committees or the full committees.
Chair Sanborn?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Our contact information is also on the website, right? So people have been finding me. I'm assuming they're finding some of us. But as long as our information is there, feel free to send it straight to me or to Ted and I. That way you're double checking.
Okay, thank you. And then the Oregon relationship, I think that was Commissioner Lapis and who else was on that? That was Sarah Toyota, I believe.
Yeah, I think our update from the last meeting was our most recent conversation with them.
Okay, so are we going to have any recommendation, do you think, from that, or we're just kind of watching them?
I'd say we're just watching them at this point. What do you think, Sarah?
Yeah, I think we are too, more because of kind of what we talked about last time, is they're so different from us, and what they did and how they did it is so different. I just don't know how we can pull from what they've done into really what we're doing in a different way. In other words, we're doing the same kind of thing. We're looking at labeling, statewide recycling their contamination, that aligns, but their solution to it having one proposal versus our kind of, not piece by piece, but it's definitely not one proposal. I mean, they had the 2 years to put it together. They just operated completely differently. And then when they came up with their answers, as I talked about last time, a lot of it is going to involve the Department of Environmental Quality to do things that CalRecycle can't do. There's just no authority there. So I just don't see how we're going to bring it in. I think that our answers for California and what we're doing our way is best for us. And we'll continue to watch how theirs goes through the legislature, but I think that's really as much as we can pull from them.
Makes sense. Well, thanks. We'll just have you report on that if there's any news every couple of weeks, and if not, that's fine too. Okay, so then EPR and other is assigned, so I think Commissioner Ward, it's you and I.
Yep. And we haven't brought anything new forward that we've been discussing the last couple weeks, I don't believe.
Well, because it was kind of under other categories, some of these, so I don't think we've got anything brewing for the next report.
I did have a question for Commissioner Toyota, and the quick question with respect to Oregon was I know that they significantly increased their deposits under the bottle bill program, and it seems certainly relevant to at least comment on how that impacted their recycling program and whether or not we should consider adjusting our deposits. Is that not part of your discussion?
No, and yes and no. I'm sorry about that. And we were really focused on the Oregon Recycling Committee and what they specifically did. And it doesn't mean that Oregon doesn't have a whole slew of other legislation that's running through their legislation right now on the bottle bill or their bottle bill. There's things on hazardous materials, there's sharps, there's separate legislation that's outside of that. And, Ted, we've been really bad about just singularly focusing on the recycling commission or their recycling committee and not a lot of the other legislature that does pertain to this committee. But you're right, we'll take a wider view of it for next meeting because I haven't. I've been just looking at what their committee has been working on. So yes, I'll look at that more broadly. You are right.
Commissioner Lopez, then you guys can also give us some update in writing on what's happening on legislation in Oregon. If you're finding something that you think is interesting, we could put it under the legislation item as well. So whatever, because it is interesting to see what other states are doing.
It is interesting, but I'm having a kind of hard time tracking everything that's happening up there.
There's only so much
and,
time.
Really understanding where the different bills are and which ones have a chance, which don't. So if anybody else who's more actively involved in Oregon's policies wants to contribute to that, that would be great.
Yeah, anybody can. If you hear about legislation anywhere that you think that the commission should know about, just send it to me and we'll get it uploaded and so forth, and I'll do the same. Okay, so enforcement. Did we have an enforcement? Who was doing that? Who was doing that? I'm sorry, I cannot remember.
I think Commissioner Lapis and I raised our hands, but we haven't made progress. And honestly, I think we're going to need to put that past the July into the next year time frame, just with everything going on. It's been noted, though.
Okay, yeah, that'll be an asterisk for the next report after the one in July. Okay, that sounds very reasonable. All right, and refillable bottles, I think that was a policy that the recycling committee was going to try to crank out. You guys had a full plate already, I think, this last week. Obviously, it looks like you've done a ton of work, so. Because that's already, and that's in the legislature, but we had decided we wanted to at least say something about that. So I guess we'll just have you guys update us on that in the next couple weeks. Is that okay, Commissioner Dunleavy?
Yeah, so you just want us to do an update on the legislation to help the refillable bottles, or what would you like to see?
We had, I think, discussed at the last meeting that the commission had said in the report that we would take up refillable bottles as a priority for this report, and that would come out of the recycling committee. And even though there's a bill, it would be good for us to be heard. So we just need to write up something on that the commission can look at. And I thought Conscious Container did submit a proposal. So if you're okay with it and you hear it through your committee or you want to edit it, then you can just forward it to us.
Okay, yes, Conscious Container, they did do a presentation, but not a proposal, and the committee did support the concept of refillables, and I think that is getting addressed through the legislation. So as far as the commission putting something in the report, just kind of a statement on what we talked about at the recycling committee,
Yeah, what the commission could support as far as refillables, because it really requires the bottle bill to be changed so that they're not forced to break the glass. It can go through the system and be reused.
Okay.
And I could have sworn that Conscious Containers submitted a policy proposal already on this, but maybe I'm wrong. So I'll go back and find out from Karen if that's the case, because that would be easier for you to start from probably. Okay, and then the renewable. Is that okay? And then the renewable technologies, I think that was Osagura and Kobe Sky, and I think you were still working on that one, and it wasn't ready for this meeting, so maybe next meeting. Is that correct, Commissioner Sky?
Yep. Definitely by next meeting. I have a good rough draft, but it needs a little bit more polishing, and I want to get Commissioner Osagura's take on the edits that I have.
Excellent. And I think that's it. Is there anything else that we need to report on or that you'd like to talk about before we move on to agenda item 5? Okay. On track here.
One other, which is the policy on subsidies, counterproductive subsidies or perverse subsidies. So I'm working on that as well. And I'm hoping to have a draft by the next meeting for that too.
That's a really big deal. And the more I see what's going on, I think the more important that is. Excellent. Okay, so then we'll go ahead and move to agenda item number 5, which is an update on our legislation. And I believe Mindy was going to join us, the CalRecycle Legislative Director. They sent a PowerPoint that was after the meeting started, which is too hard for me to upload during a meeting without messing everything up. So I didn't dare do it. So Mindy, hopefully you guys can show the screen and then I can upload it to the Google Doc later.
Sure.
But you did send me the list of bills, so.
Yes, we have the list of bills. This is just a kind of condensed version of that. As everyone knows, the legislature started committees in the first house. There are many, many bills. The committees are kind of overwhelmed at this point. So can we go to, there we go. Fixing the view there. So committees have started to meet and we are seeing some of the bills come through now. And we've had the Senate Environmental Quality hearing on March 15th, and then we'll talk about the Natural Resources Committee. But these are the bills that passed and were referred to the next committee or sent over to appropriations, but almost all of them are double referred. So SB 38 is the EPR program for bottle bill, or transitioning it over to an EPR program and through a stewardship organization rather than through CalRecycle, and that one is passed and is on to appropriations now. SB 207, it does have some amendments that were taken in committee, but those have not shown up in print yet. So SB 207 is the solar panel committee, and that has also passed and is on to the approps committee. SB 244, the lithium-ion battery, illegal disposal, fire prevention bill, also passed on consent. So SB 343, Allen, which you guys have discussed a bit today, also passed and is on to judiciary. So that one's got a little bit longer path because it's double referred. Can we skip forward?
Can we just hold for a second there? Sure. Let's see, on the Dolly bill, that's simply like a advisory committee like the lithium-ion battery one for cars, correct?
Correct.
Do they have any deliverables, like by certain dates, on what they're going to do with solar panels?
What they're going, I believe they are going to provide recommendations on what to do. Are you asking, does the committee have a date for a report?
No, I'm sorry. Does the bill require by a certain date, or, only a certain period of time? Or is it like we had deadlines for this commission? Does that have any deadlines?
I don't know if they're as hard of deadlines. Angela, I know Angela's also on the line, but honestly, I haven't looked that closely at this particular bill. We've been working on a couple of the other ones, but we can figure that out and get back to you guys on that one.
Yeah, I'm just worried because I've seen too many commissions where there's no deadlines. There's just talk, and then people feel like they've done something and then nothing gets done. And so, anyway, I'm going to watch that.
I can take a closer look at that one. which also brings up another point. If you guys are interested in a particular bill for the next update, I can, provide a little bit more in depth. But right now we have so many bills that it's just kind of crazy. But happy to do that if there are particular bills that you guys are interested in. Okay.
I am not familiar with SB 244. So this one is actually going to make it illegal to dispose of lithium-ion batteries in the trash, or what is that?
This one is a follow-up from last year. They had a similar bill, and it asked for a report on proper handling and of these items and ways to avoid fires. But it's kind of all mixed up on who does what, and given that there isn't much authority on anyone's part to affect the handling of the material, it last year didn't move forward. Just because
consent this time.
Well, it got held up in appropriations last year.
Okay. I know there's the other battery bill that's got real teeth in it. So okay. Thank you.
Okay, let's go to the next one. So this Newman bill on household batteries and battery embedded programs would create an EPR program for batteries, essentially, and Carry Cycles provided technical assistance on that particular bill. AB 649, Bennett is interested in developing or creating an Office of Environmental Justice and Tribal Relations within CalRecycle. SB 619, this is not a Bennett bill, this is a Laird bill. Sorry, I didn't catch that before we brought it forward, but this bill would delay enforcement of 1383, and the time period is left blank in that bill. Moving forward. AB 1454 includes many components to make changes to the bottle bill program and allow more flexibility on payments, etc. AB 661, Bennett, also this would affect our state agency buy recycle program and update that program. So
I think these two are directly coming from some of the recommendations of the commission. So it'd be interesting for me to hear from the commissioners after we get through this, what they think of these two bills.
Yes. Okay, so committee dates. Again, the bill load is crazy this year and the process is a little bit different, but you see the bills that are up in the next committees coming forwards. But by the end of the month, we'll have this first round of committees done. Next slide. So we've provided the bill list to you guys, but you can also find it here on our webpage.
Very much.
Any questions? And again, if before the next meeting there are particular bills that you guys would like to hear about, we can get into a little bit more depth there.
Well, to me, the ones that are most interesting are the ones that seem to be coming from our recommendations. So I think following closely the one on the bottle bill, which we sent the urgency letter on, AJR 4, which will be heard on the 22nd, the state agency buy recycle campaign update. Are there any others, you all, that came out of our recommendations?
SB 289, I think, is really important.
The solar panel recommendations are due April 2025. There you go. My staff is good.
Thank you. Recommendations in 2025, that's exactly, that's what I was worried about.
By April 2022 and recommendations due by 2025.
I generally am interested in SB 38, and I want to clearly state because I've heard criticisms of this very commission saying that we're all about trying to make EPR the bottle bill program. And I clearly state that SB 38 had nothing to do with the recommendations of this commission. But I am curious about how that evolves as if it does pass and become law, it would totally change what it is we're doing.
A couple bills that came out of the committee recommendations would be 1201. I don't know if you mentioned that one, the Chang compostable products. legislation, and I'd say 1454, which is the bottle bill comprehensive update that includes a bunch of different recommendations that we had, including dealing with the commingled rate for PET thermoforms and a few other things that we've talked about.
And also Assembly 881, which is a plastic exports bill.
Yeah, right. That's a big one. That was part of our recommendations. So Mindy, if you could make sure you track those, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, those are all on the list. You might not have heard of them today just because some of them were in committee and they are scheduled in the future. But again, I mean, it's kind of hard right now because a lot of these bills still are, while they have substance to them, the changes, we're really not going to know where the author is going or where the legislative discussion is going for a little while. But it seems like you guys are all aware of many of the bills that are out there that are really, I mean, there's a lot of good ideas on recycling and a lot of interest in recycling, which is really great that all of these members are interested in taking these topics on. So I can, again, go through bills, but it sounds like you guys have already, the details of bills, but you guys are already tracking the ones you're most interested in. But anyway, just let me know beforehand there are questions on legislation, and I can also try to answer those in the briefing.
I would say to commissioners, if you want to have a specific expanded update on something before the next commission meeting, just email me and I'll make sure we get, let Mindy know that. And I guess I found that, so the bottle, since like thermoforms has got two bills then, there's the bottle bill one that's going to actually change the baling thing, and then the other one that's about recycled content. Is that right, Commissioner Lapis? That's what I heard you say?
It's
that's correct.
Well, okay.
Is it not in 1454 yet, Mindy? It will be.
We should look at what's in print, but yeah, I mean, the intention is to have that conversation either in the team bill or the boom bill, I think.
Very good. Well, thank you for that. Do commissioners have any questions on this? Is Commissioner Dunleavy?
Yes, thank you. No, I was out, now I'm back in. Yeah, with the legislation, there's a lot out there with SB 38, which could be a complete overhaul of the program, 1454, and then there's several others, 1067, SB 451, AB 1311, definitely a lot of activity, but the concern is the urgency letter that we took, or that we submitted. It doesn't look like anything was taken up through a budget trailer bill, where something could happen sooner. Any legislation will take at least 3 years to get implemented, which is a concern. It's too long for all the underserved areas in California that could be without recycling centers for a long period of time, and it could result in the closure of additional recycling centers. So hopefully there'll be something that stimulates the opening of recycling centers and supports those that are struggling in the underserved areas with long lines. Last week I was at a recycling center, the only one in Hayward, and the owner is directing traffic from 8:30 until 10:30 every morning because he can't afford to hire anybody else. But he's the only recycling center in that area. And I think Commissioner Valle is probably on the traffic line on Saturdays. So we need some help soon.
I'm very frustrated about this. I mean, we were very clear in that urgency letter that something needs to be done quickly, and it doesn't seem that anything's going to be done quickly. We've heard from the public repeatedly that this is a problem. I can't even think about increasing the deposit until we get this convenience situation figured out. Does anybody have any suggestions? Is there anything else we can do?
I spoke to a representative, a field rep for Senator McGuire's office, and they basically acknowledged receipt of the letter and then said that they were working on expanding the pilot projects. I expressed my concerns about the pilot projects and the various ways the pilot projects were not going to help address these challenges. That still seems to be the focus.
I don't know how these pilot projects got into people's heads that it's going to deal with a convenience that's an emergency issue. I mean, they're testing different things. It's just very weird how this got really confused over there. Well, I'm all ears. If you have a suggestion, should we resend the letter and remind everybody that this is not getting done? And we've got a lot of people very upset during this crisis that need their money back and can't get it. And remind them that the pilots are not going to solve that problem. I'd be happy to do it if you thought it would help. I'm not sure. It will, though. Commissioner Donlevy, do you have any,
there's a lot of interest, but unfortunately it's through legislation and not through an urgency bill or something that could take effect July 1st. I'm very concerned. The program, it just isn't getting fixed. You know, I wish there would have been an urgency bill to give Director Wagner some authority to make some changes where need be, but it doesn't look like that's happening. I mean, we still have a few months left before the end of the session. Maybe somebody could provide some leadership to do that. So.
Yeah, how about a letter to the editor on the Los Angeles Times by the chair?
Happy to do it. It's up to you guys. I mean, honestly, I feel really bad about how this is not happening. I mean, it's one of the most important things we did.
But also rolling in the impact of COVID. People are not in line for an hour because they're environmentalists. They're in line because they need the money and they're living on the edge. And I would roll that kind of comment into the letter if the chair is apt to doing it.
Happy to do it. And I think actually I would want another second set of eyes, and maybe the vice chair would work with me on that. And then you and I can get it in. I think it would send a signal from the chair and the vice chair of the commission if you all give us the authority to write that kind of a letter and send it to the LA.
I'll move, I would say every major paper, SAC-B, San Francisco Chronicle, LA Times, San Jose Mercury News, all the big ones.
Yeah, I thought the letter that we submitted was good. It would have created a stimulus to stabilize existing struggling recycling centers in the underserved area and provided funding to help open recycling centers in underserved areas. And they're throughout the state. So I would second that and definitely support it. In the pilot programs, as you mentioned, I do not think they're the solution. The technology is being proposed, whether it's RVMs or bag drop, should just be allowed. But to have pilot programs that run 4 years to test something that we know works in many states, I don't think we need to do it. We just need to provide the funding to do it.
Your programs are not addressing an urgency problem. So I'll go ahead, work with the Commissioner Valle. We'll base it off of the letter that we sent, which you all approved, and we'll do it specific around, we'll send it to the biggest papers we can to get them to publish it and go down the line until we get someone to print it. But it'll be him and I authoring it, and then on behalf of you, and we can attach that letter or link to that letter that we originally sent that we're concerned this hasn't been picked up. Commissioner Sky, did you want to say something?
Just a minor point. I know that some places won't publish a letter to the editor if it's submitted to a different publication. If the audience is the legislature, I would focus on the Sacramento Bee.
And then we'll go down the line. If they don't take it up, we'll go. Okay, sounds good. Commissioner Schneider, did you want to say anything?
I was going to say exactly the same thing. The Chronicle and the Mercury won't publish if they're both in either of the papers, nor will the subsidiaries.
None of them do.
So the B is good, but if it gets published in the B, then the rest of us can pick it up and send it in a letter to the editor to our locals, including the Chron and the Merc for my area.
Right, we'll go ahead and do that. All right, so our plan will be to get that by the end of the week because it's already basically written. We'll just repackage it. Thank you very much for the input. So on that, I think we're done with the state legislation. And we can move on quickly to the federal. Now, next time I'm going to put the agenda item not specific to the Clean Future Act, but actually about any federal legislation that we might want to talk about. Commissioner Potashner and I talked pre-request, and we did take the Clean Act and we took the fact sheet and the press release and we posted it on the Google document so everybody has it. It's got the link to the bill at the bottom of the press release. I put the link to the actual bill, which is like 1,000 pages, but it does have a whole section on waste reduction as a way to deal with climate change. So that's very exciting. For the first time, I feel like we finally are getting people to understand that waste management directly impacts climate change. It directly impacts ocean litter, all this stuff. So Commissioner Potashner, did you want to speak to that briefly?
Sure. And just to clarify, you're not talking about the company Waste Management, right?
Sorry. No, I mean waste, managing waste, materials management.
Yeah, so tomorrow at 8 a.m. our time, 11 o'clock DC time, the Clean Futures Act will be up in Energy and Commerce for a hearing. Title IX is the section that Heidi's talking about. Hopefully folks have time to review it. We will monitor the hearing tomorrow and hopefully we can report back any findings. The section does give Cal EPA some broad authority to set up EPR programs, weigh in on labeling, on recycled content requirements, as well as funding for education and infrastructure. So there's some good opportunity here in this bill, and it meshes well with the work we're doing here. So looking forward to reporting back out.
Me too, especially after the labeling discussion and that the opposition on the labeling bill is saying that they need, the reason that they can't support the Allen bill is because they have different states that mandate those chasing arrows. Of course, they're the ones that encouraged them to adopt that years ago, and that we need a national standard. So this could be an opportunity for a national labeling standard. Commissioner, I think there's a public comment and then we'll go to Commissioner Davis.
Yes, there's one public comment from Gail Bryce at XT Green. I recommend the Commission in considering a response to the Clean Futures Act. Per the current draft, the contribution of recycling to green jobs, climate action, and the recovery of plastic materials to replace virgin material does not appear to be appreciated on the federal level. Carpet is an example of what can be accomplished by investing in recycling. The California Carpet Stewardship Program has resulted in the major expansion of the state carpet recycling infrastructure, which has a current and rising recycling rate of 20+%. Outside of California, the carpet recycling rate is 3%, with 3 to 4 billion pounds of carpet going to landfill. Most of the material recovered through carpet recycling replaces virgin plastic, which results in a massive greenhouse gas emission reduction benefit. I encourage the Commission to request the expansion of the role of recycling, including funding new facilities in the Clean Futures Act.
Thank you. And Commissioner Davis?
Yeah, just I did kind of peruse the act this morning, but the section 9 that Mr. Potashner mentioned is 117 pages. There's 48 different sections. There's some language in there that's pretty interesting. Commissioner Valle expressed his opinion about plastic manufacturing earlier, and there's some language regarding plastic facilities and basically putting a moratorium and then having US EPA begin to regulate those facilities. So there's some language in there that we might want to extract, and so I'm interested in hearing more about it. I also, in the earlier discussion about Oregon, there is in Oregon Senate Bill 582, and I think we should be taking a look at it. It's the legislative package to modernize Oregon's recycling system. So a lot of what's in there parallels what we've done, and but it is in legislation and probably worth looking at it. I think Mr. Lapis mentioned that earlier. So yeah, I'm glad we're looking outside our purview for ideas.
Go ahead if there is a bill that you'd like us to talk about, anybody on the commission or anybody outside could email me and say, hey, we think this bill relates to what you're doing, might be interested in it, and then I'll put together a list and we can upload that. And on the next agenda, we won't list it as just the Clean Future Act. We'll list, I think we'll do not only California legislation, but we'll do other states and federal legislation update. If there's anything that any of us see that we think we should at least keep an eye on or know what's going on. And then the question would become, we did get the authority under the amendment to the bill, the original bill authorizing our formation, to provide comments to anyone on bills. So if we think that we should be weighing in, especially on these federal bills that are going to impact our work, or we're hearing, for example, on our recommendation on labeling, that there's a national labeling, authority being given to EPA and taking it away from the FTC, we may very much want to weigh in on that. So I will continue to look at these with Commissioner Potashner, but if anybody has any bills, like Commissioner Davis just mentioned, please just email them to us and then we'll put together a little, and it'll probably grow over time, all the bills, till they start getting whittled through. Okay, with that, I think we can move on, unless no other comments on this. Move on to agenda item 7, which is future meetings. At this point, I don't think we're going to plan to hear any other presenters at any of our commission meetings from here on and through July, unless someone makes a suggestion to do that. We're going to have a lot of policies coming to us for the next few months, and language we have to review for the report, the final report. And I really think at this point we ought to focus on those, if that's okay with you. And if anybody wants to hear something, hear it in the committees. That way we keep our docket open and we don't have these going into 4-hour meetings again, because we're having a hard enough time keeping it to 2. Okay, so with that, I think we'll move on. So thumbs up from Commissioner Sky. So agenda item 8 is just the meeting summary and closing. So we had a great meeting, had a great talk about recyclable and the legislation. And I'm going to work with Commissioner Valle. I'll be calling you and we'll figure out a plan on how to get an article written and in the Sacramento, at least introduced, and giving it to the Sacramento Bee about our urgency letter on the bottle bill and getting people their money back and getting convenience up. So we'll go ahead and do that. And then I wish you all happy St. Patrick's Day, and go out and have some fun tonight. We just got out of the purples here, so hopefully things will be more fun this evening. And I think we've got a couple of committees next week, so we'll look forward to talking to you all again on, it looks like April 7th. And if you'd like, the Rexpo, I'm going to send out promotional materials today. The Rexpo Recycling Expo is going to have their big free webinar on the 31st if you're interested. I think a couple of us will be on that, talking about markets. Okay, thank you so much. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Bye, everybody.